To make disciples is different from gathering crowd. Anybody can gather crowd. Davido fills stadiums. Burna Boy, Tiwa Savage, they fill stadiums. Michael Jackson was packing stadiums all over the world.
Alright guys, and once again I want to welcome you back to church today. One time ago, Pastor Paul Enenche called out Dr. Abel Damina for correcting some teachings, some doctrines from the other pastors, and he has basically mocked Dr. Abel Damina concerning the size of his congregation, his inability to gather crowd and all that. And he has said that he cannot confidently show the crowd of his congregation. But Dr. Abel Damina has replied him, and in this particular video, Dr. Abel Damina reply him, and I believe we should watch this video and let us get what you think about this particular video.
To make disciples is different from gathering crowd. Anybody can gather crowd. Davido fills stadiums. Burna Boy, Tiwa Savage, they fill stadiums. Michael Jackson was packing stadiums all over the world. Michael Jackson's appearance made women to collapse and faint, and yet that was not ministry. So it's not about gathering crowd. The mandate is to make disciples. To make disciples is the Greek word martyrtio. Martyrtio means to turn people into students of all that Jesus has taught. I heard somebody says, well, leave people to preach whatever they want to preach. If your own is success, preach success. If your own is prosperity, preach prosperity. If your own is whatever, preach whatever you're called to preach. No, if there's no such open-ended freedom to preach anything you want to preach. The Bible is a singular revelation tied by a singular message of a singular character. John 5:39, Jesus will say, you search the scriptures, for in them you think you have eternal life, but they are they which testify of me. The message of the gospel is such that the rich and the poor are in need of it. The sick and the healed are in need of it. Like I've always said, there's nothing like the gospel of prosperity. It's just transaction. It's just businessmen in collars. That's what the Archbishop, if you watch very carefully recently, the video of the late Archbishop Benson Idahosa is in circulation, where he said, if any preacher tells you, give, get, give, receive, give, get, he says he's a businessman. He's a businessman on the pulpit. It says the Bible warns that you should stay away from such people. Any gospel that promises you what Jesus never promised you, bogus promises, that gives you promises that are not from Jesus, run away from such gospel. Don't even stay where such gospel is predicated, because eventually the legacy of ministry is not houses. It's not our church buildings. It is not how many people you gathered. It is not how much money you had. The legacy of ministry is the message you preached. That's why it's a laugh when somebody says, be careful of social media doctrines. You know, when somebody says, if you don't pay tithe, you will not go to heaven. They didn't say beware of social media doctrines, but it was on social media we saw it. When somebody says, if you don't give the 10% of your tithe, if it is less than 10%, angels will move it to offering account.
The tithe of 10 naira is 1 naira. There's no other geography or arithmetic about it. But the tithe of 10,000 is not 1 naira. Stop abusing the covenant. So when you mark your envelope by tithe, the angel will say, stop insulting God. I will take this to Jesus as your offering. So many people think they are tithing. No. If it's less than tithe, it's transferred to offering account. So no window opens, just blessing on what to eat and what to drink. You know, heaven is full of order. So when your tithe is less than your tithe, it's transferred to offering account. So they can tell you have not tithe for the past 10 years. The reason is that your tithe has been transferred to offering.
Nobody said anything about it on social media. But when we began to shout very loud the message of his death, burial, resurrection, ascension, and glorification, now they call it social media doctrines. But I'm sure if those people were alive in the days of Brother Paul, they will have called Brother Paul a later writer, because most of Brother Paul's revelations were communicated by writing.
Everybody is driven by being successful. And all our preaching is about success, success. But we have to be very careful of our definition of success, because heaven's definition of success is different from man's definition of success. And let me explain to you. Jesus said, among all men born of a woman, John the Baptist is the greatest of all. And John the Baptist didn't raise the dead. He didn't perform a miracle. He didn't have a church. He didn't have a land. He didn't possess anything. John the Baptist was an intercessor. He went ahead of Jesus to pray and intercede for the coming of the Messiah, to make the way of the Lord straight. Hear me. When the disciples of Jesus said to him in Luke 11, teach us to pray, the next thing they said was, teach us how to pray like John the Baptist taught his disciples how to pray. John the Baptist was the only one apart from Jesus who taught his disciples to pray. John the Baptist was an intercessor. In the book of Malachi, he said, he will come, I will send the Elisha, who will come before that great and dreadful day of the Lord. And the spirit of Elijah is the spirit of prophetic intercession. So John the Baptist was a heavy intercessor. That's why he lived in the wilderness and he ate yogurt and honey. He wasn't involved in town. He wasn't distracted at all. His job was to intercede for the manifestation of the Messiah. And Jesus said, watch this. He said, among all men born of a woman, until he shed his blood, that John the Baptist was the greatest of all. That means he was greater than Abraham, Moses, Elijah, Elisha, all the Old Testament prophets, greater than all. That's what Jesus said. Now, look at heaven's definition of success. And I said to them, and congregation members, you got to watch this. Got to watch this. I said to them, there were two young men who were positioned to support Moses and to lift up his hand. And as long as the hand of Moses was lifted up, the children of Israel, led by Joshua in the valley at war with Amalek, prevailed. And anytime his hand was weary and came down, Amalek prevailed against Israel. So watch this. Imagine what would have happened if those two young men were removed from being on the right and left hand of Moses to give him the support and the necessary help he needed. Watch this. And they went and they built their own ministry, end time prophetic assembly, or call it whatever. And they had a congregation. One had a congregation of 100,000. Another had a congregation of 1,000,000 souls. The souls would have been won to God. They will be saved because salvation belongs to the Lord, not to any one of us. But those two young men will not be rewarded in heaven. They will have no reward in heaven. No reward. Even though they won all those souls. You know why they will not be rewarded? Because that wasn't their assignment. They were not assigned to go and have a ministry of 1,000,000 or 100,000 people. Their ministry was simple. Stand by Moses. Support his hand so that his hand will not go down. Now hear me. Don't clap yet.
Alright guys, what can you say about this? So Dr. Abel Damina replied Pastor Paul Enenche in this particular video. Let me get your reaction concerning this. Alright guys, don't forget to join us here, like, share and subscribe for more updates on this channel.